Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and this is another episode of Ask the Lawyer. It's starting to seem like every day there's a story in the news about another big company that has let our personal information be accessed in a data breach. And well, today we're going to ask the lawyer about what is being done, what can be done about it. And my guest is attorney Brian Chase of the Newport Beach-based consumer rights law firm of Bisnar Chase. Brian is going to tell us about two recent breaches specifically and what his firm is doing about those. Brian, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it as well.
So can you give us a breakdown of these two specific breaches that we were talking about? I think Quest and First American Title Company. What happened in these particular data breaches?
Yeah, so it's real interesting, and it's too bad it happens. This cybersecurity issue and cyber warfare, so to speak, is becoming a very serious problem out there. With regard to Quest, as most people probably know, they're the largest blood testing provider in the country. And the data breach with regard to them affected nearly 12 million customers. And what happened specifically with regard to that breach, it was actually one of their billing collection companies that collects money for Quest that had this information and had it breached, a company called American Medical Collection Agency. They were the ones that actually had the information breached or where it was breached from. And I know we'll talk later about what type of information was breached. But then with regard to First American Title, that is, again, also one of the largest title insurance companies in the United States. And that one is really interesting. That appears at this point in time to be more of an internal breach as opposed to like a cyber thief coming in and stealing information. They had a problem on their website on how they would transmit information intra-company to people. And as it turns out, a real estate developer realized he had access to information and documents that he should not have access to. And then he reported it back to the company. So it appears right now anyway, that was an internal breach where they just had a bad system on their website, which I can talk more about later if we need to.
And what sort of information are we talking about? Are we talking about social security numbers, financial information? I don't know if there's any medical information in the Quest Diagnostics. What sort of stuff? Yeah,
there is. And, with regard to Quest Diagnostic, I mean, that is the mother lode of data information that got breached from that company. Social security numbers, names, date of births, email addresses, driver's license information, medical information. I mean, all kinds of super serious private information you don't want in the wrong hands. That was just really a major breach. They could have major ramifications on folks if it gets used improperly. And the information there, that medical information that Quest got breached, for example, on the black market, according to various news sources from the federal government, criminals would buy a social security number for like $1, okay? This Quest data information on the black market goes for $50 a pop.
Wow.
So it's 50 times more valuable than just getting a social security number, to kind of put that in context. And similarly with the American Title, the same type of information was breached, other than obviously not the medical information. But,
And what sort of numbers? You mentioned 12 million for Quest. What sort of numbers were we talking about with First American?
Yeah, 900 million. Yeah, 900 million people breached going back 16 years.
That's incredible. It's hard to even imagine.
No, it is hard to imagine. And I mean, to add insult to injury on that one, it wasn't even as though there was a cyber attack and someone, cracked into their system. It was just an internal flaw that, self-inflicted wound, so to speak.
Wow. Okay. So we're not talking small mom and pop companies that maybe aren't very savvy about keeping the data secure. Don't these companies have systems in place to keep this sort of stuff secure?
Obviously not. They've got some systems in place. Quest is, they've got to comply with various federal regulations. They've got to comply with HIPAA requirements. So, I'm sure they had some systems in place. The litigation is early on, so we don't know exactly where it failed. But typically, when it comes to these data breaches, they, there's malware attacks. There's people that have, access codes or passwords that are too easy to break into. Usually it's just, somebody doing something just making one little mistake. And then when there's a crack in that armor, man, the people that want that information know how to get into it. And
So,
you know what, just real quick on what's really interesting about the Quest is, and how it could have been so preventable, is I don't know why their billing collection agency, who obviously needs some information because they've got to go collect bills, I don't know why they had all of this information. There's no way the billing company needed to have all of that. So, one way to just solve that problem is the billing company should have just had minimal information that it needed to collect bills.
and how do people know if they're, I mean, when you're talking 900 million, how do people know if they're one of the ones that was involved in the breach?
Yeah, as it stands now, we don't know. Typically what will happen, and I expect this to happen in the oncoming, weeks, it has happened when we see the Yahoo data breach, the Anthem data breach, Equifax, all of those. Typically what the company will do is they'll create a website and a way for people to go in and search to find out if their information was breached. As it stands now, I'm not aware of a way to confirm that your information was stolen. When we talk about these numbers, I think it's safe to assume more likely than not it was. But we don't know yet, and we're still trying to figure out how to ascertain that.
And you mentioned the litigation a minute ago. Let's talk about the litigation, what your firm is doing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we were one of the first, I don't know if we were the first, but one of the first in both of them to file class actions, here in California, although it will be a national class action. And so those lawsuits are on file. We'll ultimately have some hearings coming up in the near future. And we'll, come up with a game plan with the court, with the defendants, work hand in hand on a strategy to get to the bottom of this, and then hopefully to a successful resolution. I know that with other data breach cases that my firm has been involved with, they all have resolved, relatively satisfactorily to make sure people are protected. One, first and foremost, for my clients, but two, for prospective clients in the future. Hopefully they're not a client, and make sure there are, remedies in place so it doesn't happen to these companies again.
Right, and other companies might get the message that, hey, maybe we need to be a little more watch the doors a little more closely.
Yeah, I mean, I realize we're in a super hyper technological world now, and it's not like in the old days where you just put a security guard at the door and you guard your safe. But with the cloud and all this type of information, we've just got to make sure it's significantly better protected than it is now.
So what do you recommend to people that think maybe don't know if they're a part of the group, that or maybe they know their information is part of this litigation? Do they contact you? Do they wait to hear more about it? What's the process?
Yeah, well, what I would recommend anybody, if they feel that they were breached, and frankly, I think, more likely than not you were, when we talk about the kinds of numbers that are involved, I would, if you're overly concerned about it, I would, contact a credit monitoring agency and hire that service to monitor your credit, so you will know if someone, is using your information improperly, whether it's to get bank loans. I've heard of people, getting bank loans taken out in their name, remortgaging their house. I mean, all kinds of crazy things can happen. And so if you're concerned about that, I would get a credit monitoring agency today and have my credit monitored, so you will know, if you're being.
Is it the sort of thing, Brian, that people should only contact an attorney? Do they only have redress if the information has been used in some way to, affect their credit or to do something in their name, or is it just the fact that the information someone got a hold of it that shouldn't have had it?
Yeah, I mean, typically, if you feel you've been breached, you should contact an attorney to find out what your rights are, and to make sure if you've had a significant injury and someone has not only stolen your identity, but used it and it's harmed you monetarily, the only way to get compensated back for that would be through the course of the litigation, would be my expectation. I'm not aware of a company, out of the kindness of their heart, offering you money to resolve a case because they realize they made a mistake. Now, this is early on in this litigation. I guess it's possible that would happen, but I would contact an attorney, make sure my rights are protected, and also contact a credit monitoring agency to monitor my credit and protect myself.
With a class action that potentially could involve numbers this big, do you see damages being significant for people? How would you project that to play out?
Yeah, no, I do. And typically, because there's so many people involved, I mean, it's going to be, to resolve this case, tens of millions of dollars, maybe over, hundreds of millions of dollars to get them ultimately resolved. It's too soon to speculate exactly how, but at a minimum, when these cases are resolved, we insist on the defendant companies put in place better measures to make sure this never happens again, because we want to protect future people. With regard to our clients, we make sure that the company pays for the credit monitoring for 5 years or some number down the road. So they are paying to make sure your credit's monitored, to make sure you're not getting hacked into. If you take my advice and go get credit monitoring now, when this case resolves, if it resolves, we'll get you reimbursed for that, because that's not something that you should have to pay for. And then most importantly, for the folks that get serious harm done to them financially through some sort of financial fraud on a bank loan or remortgaging a house or whatever the case may be, get you compensated and reimbursed for that type of fraud, because that can be devastating to a person. Yeah.
And we're still very early, obviously, in the litigation process. Do you think this is something that takes months, years? How long would you guess something like this could run?
Typically with these cases, I do find that it won't be months, but I don't think it'll be years either. I'm going to say typically somewhere between a year and a little over a year and under 2 years, the case ought to be resolved. I would think it's not really hard to get to the bottom of how the breach occurred. So it'll take several months. We'll have to get documents. There'll be millions of documents that need to be mulled over. There'll be depositions taken, but we'll figure that out pretty early on. And then, the company doesn't really have, or these companies don't typically have a good argument or defense on why they got breached. And so usually they do want to go into a mediation and try to resolve the case as long as everybody's being reasonable. So I would say 12 to 24 months and under the 24-month mark probably.
All right, excellent. It's incredible how many people could be affected by this. Brian, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been attorney Brian Chase of the Newport Beach firm Bisnar Chase. I want you to take a second, please, if you click on the button at the bottom of the screen so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you'll find out about any future episodes. And if you think you've been the victim or know you've been the victim of a data breach, you want the best information, or you're ready to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, please visit AskTheLawyers.com. I'm Rob Rosenthal for AskTheLawyers.com.